All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again. So I hope that you have your copies of Macbeth ready to annotate as we go along. As you can see, our digital text here recently updated its style and formatting, which I actually like quite a bit. So we're just going to take a look at scene 1 in this video, and I'll save scenes 2 and 3 for another video. So, actually gonna skip through a decent bit of this just to focus on the most essential pieces. Because a lot of, especially the first part of this scene, really emphasizes just the theatrics of what's happening on stage, namely the fact that you have the witches here, essentially around a cauldron, casting spells and putting together this wicked, witching brew and preparing for Macbeth's entrance. And so you get lots of details about all the terrible, evil, vile things that they're throwing into this brew. And yeah, the intention is to gross you out. And some of these things have some kind of deeper double meanings to them, like the fact that they're throwing in the liver of a blaspheming Jew, for example. But the details aren't the most essential thing here, so you're welcome to take a look at your Yale annotated text there, and you can see some of the references that these ingredients pertain to. But one thing that we can notice right here, something that's frequently cut out of performances, is Hecate again. For whatever reason, Hecate is recently performed on stage in stagings of Macbeth. And so, whereas we saw her back in scene 5 saying, hey, basically let me in on this deal that y'all got going with Macbeth. I want a part of this. And so the witches are putting together this brew, and Hecate comes on for just long enough to congratulate them on what they've done. Oh, well done, I commend your pains, and everyone shall share in the gains. And now about the cauldron sing like elves and fairies in a ring, enchanting all that you put in. So she kind of adds her last little touch, last little blessing, and then leaves. And now we come to this, and this is actually a fairly important piece of dialogue from the second witch here. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. This is another famous line of this play, specifically the something wicked this way comes part. And what's worth noting here is that we know, of course, they're referring to Macbeth. And what's noteworthy is that the witches themselves, who are, as we know, evil, conniving, scheming, sense Macbeth's approach and say that he is wicked. And so if the witches are calling Macbeth wicked, you know that he's fallen quite a way. Alright, so Macbeth enters. And essentially what Macbeth wants here is just for them to throw new prophecies at him. He has gotten to a point where he's not satisfied with what they prophesied previously because it's come true. And now we know that he's, cast in, the way that he would put it, in saucy doubts. Paranoia racks him all over. And so he needs more from them in order to feel safe and secure, which of course we know is a fundamental desire of his. And so here he's really demanding that they tell him everything that he wants to know, regardless of what it be. Even here he says, even till destruction sicken. So even if it's bad news, still answer me to what I ask you. And so they agree. And they go one step further. Say if thou hadst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters. Which is notable because, once again, we know that Hecate's in it. So we know that the witches aren't the ultimate power here. And so that they actually have a greater power that they can tap into for this particular prophecy. And we get the impression they spent so much time putting together this brew that it is quite potent. And so Macbeth agrees. All right. And so, here we come. Thunder, first apparition, an armed head. Essentially, this is just a disembodied head with a helmet. The armed part is referring to a helmet, which you see pretty clearly in the Stratford production. And so, if we're talking about an apparition, we're talking about, a spirit, a ghost of sorts, but not something that is like the ghost of a person, but, more of a kind of, you might say, amorphous ghost. Okay. And so Macbeth has a question in mind. Tell me, thou unknown power, and notice how they cut him off. He knows thy thought. Hear his speech, but say thou not. So you don't need to talk to this thing. He already knows what you're thinking, so just shut your mouth and listen. And here are the first apparitions. Prophecy. Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Beware Macduff. Beware the Thane of Fife. Dismiss me enough. Now, what's important for us to do here is to, one, understand what the apparitions are saying, but also to recognize how Macbeth responds to these apparitions, what his reaction is to them, how they inform his thought and his feeling, especially as it relates to that one single desire, not just to be thus, to be king, but to be safely thus. So let's see how this plays out. Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Beware Macduff. Beware the Thane of Fife. Dismiss me enough. That's pretty straightforward. Hey, be scared of Macduff. Know that Macduff, that is the Thane of Fife. You just need to be aware of him. Now, Macbeth, of course, already knows this. He's already planted his suspicion, his paranoia on Macduff, and so this is really just a confirmation of what Macbeth already knows, which, if you think about it, is not unlike what the witches first did when he first met him all the way back in Act 1. What was the first thing that they said? Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. Macbeth was already Thane of Glamis. They were telling him something that he already knew, but it really set the table for the prophecies that were going to come later. So once again, this is kind of engendering Macbeth's trust to betray him in deepest consequence. So Macbeth's response, whate'er thou art, for thy good caution, thanks. Thank you for giving me that heads up. Appreciate it. Thou hast harped my fear aright. You've confirmed what I already knew. You've harped my fear in Macduff. You've confirmed it, but one word more. Once again, he gets cut off, and they're like, he will not be commanded. Shut your mouth. Here's another one coming up, more potent than the first. So here Macbeth is likely to get some information that he does not yet know. All right, thunder. Second apparition, a bloody child. And once again, this is something that you see play out pretty intensely in the Stratford production. And we could speak to possibly what the symbolism behind a bloody child is, not just in connection with what the prophecy actually says, but also to Macbeth's, the fact that he and Lady Macbeth don't have a child, the fact that possibly at one point before the events of the play they had a child who maybe died in some way, shape, or form, that is a kind of grief that maybe they carry with them based on what we've heard from Lady Macbeth. And so as a result, just the visual of this might stick deep with Macbeth and catch his attention. But let's see what the second apparition has to say. Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee. And notice that, he's paying extra attention here, is basically what he's saying. Be bloody, bold, and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. This is a big one right here. So be bloody, be bold, be resolute. Safe to say Macbeth has already been pretty bloody. Safe to say he's already been pretty bold, the fact that he's followed through on killing kings, and he is certainly growing in resolution and doing things to, at least as far as he feels, to secure his position as king. But it goes one step forward. Laugh to scorn the power of man. Don't take the power of your enemies seriously. Why? For none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Here's the great question. Who is not a woman born? Well, no one. Everyone is born of a woman. So as far as like Macbeth is concerned, like, who does he have to fear? Nobody. And in fact, that's exactly what he says. Notice how he connects this prophecy with the one that he received just prior. Ah, then live, Macduff. What need I fear of thee? First apparition says, beware of Macduff. The second one says, none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. So laugh to scorn the power of man. So he's like, okay, well then, fine, Macduff. Who cares if you live or die? I don't have any need to be afraid of you because you're born of a woman just like everyone else is. And I've just been told that I have nothing to fear of anyone who's born of a woman. But notice what he does here. But yet, I'll make assurance double sure, and take a bond of fate thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. So, on the one hand, he's saying, oh, I've got nothing to be afraid of when it comes to Macduff. On the other hand, he's saying, well, I'm gonna make sure just in case. So, yeah, I don't have to be afraid of you. I'm still gonna kill you anyway. So that I can do what? I can tell pale-hearted fear it lies. So if there's something that is racking my brain that's telling me I should be afraid of it, I can say, nah, I've got nothing to be afraid of. Fear is just a lie, and I'm not going to believe it. And sleep in spite of thunder. This is a profound line, especially since we know that Macbeth is not sleeping. Macbeth doth murdered sleep, so Macbeth shall sleep no more. And so he's had this storm, all this thunder, rolling around him for quite a while now. And he is of the mind that, well, if he kills Macduff, then he'll finally be able to sleep in spite of the storm. All right, the third apparition comes. A child crowned with a tree in his hand. And so we can think of some significance straight away, especially if we think of a child being crowned. There's been so much talk of a lineage of kings, the fact that Banquo's lineage is going to become king, and Macbeth's will not. So that image already carries some significance for us. And then he has a tree in his hand. This image is hazy for us at this point, but as we'll see, is going to become more clear in its significance later. Okay, so Macbeth realizes what he's saying. What is this that rises like the issue of a king? So like, the child, the son of a king, and wears upon his baby brow the round and top of sovereignty. So, a crown. And once again, they come back to it. Listen, but speak not to it. And the third apparition's prophecy, be lion-mettled, proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are. Macbeth shall never be vanquished until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come. And so, on the one hand, it's just reinforcing what the second apparition told him. Hey, be bloody, bold, and resolute. So, be lion-mettled, be proud, take no care who chafes, frets, work where conspirers are. Don't worry about your enemies, what they're plotting, where they are, because Macbeth shall never be vanquished, he'll never be defeated, until what? Great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Now, Dunsinane Hill is where the King of Scotland's castle is, so this is where Macbeth is living at this point. And we'll take a look at a map here before too long to illustrate some of these locales here. And Great Birnam Wood is a forest that is not too far from Dunsinane. And so what's being suggested here is that until a whole forest gets up and moves towards Macbeth's castle, he's never going to be defeated, which should strike us as silly and ridiculous and impossible. And that's exactly how Macbeth interprets this. That will never be, he says. Who can impress the forest, bid the tree unfix his earthbound root? Can a tree get up and walk? Like an ent in Lord of the Rings? No, of course not. Sweet bodements, good. I've heard nothing but good things. Rebellious dead, rise Never till the wood of Burnham rise, and our high-placed Macbeth shall live the lease of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom. Yet my heart throbs to know one thing. So he's heard nothing but good news, but there's still one thing that is bothering him. Tell me, if your heart can tell so much, shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom? And they caution him. They say, seek to know more, no more. I don't think you really want to know. And he says, I will be satisfied. Deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know. And so they acquiesce. All right, show. And so we get this stage direction. A show of 8 kings, the 8th king with a glass in his hand, and Banquo last. So this is Banquo's kind of last appearance on stage, with a procession of kings, all this being symbolic of Banquo's line of kings, one after the other and one after the other. And this is exactly what Macbeth sees. Thou art too like the spirit of Banquo, because of course, like they're Banquo's kids, they all, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they all kind of share that same look about them. Thy crown does sear mine eyeballs, he can't bear to look at it. And thy hair, thou other gold-bound brow, is like the first. They're all wearing crowns. The third is like the former. Filthy hags, why do you show me this? Well, because he asked for it, dummy. A fourth, start, eyes. What, will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? It just keeps going on and on and on. Another yet, a seventh, I'll see no more. And yet the 8th appears, who bears a glass which shows me many more. So it's like now he's almost staring into kind of this magic mirror that just shows king upon king upon king upon king upon king. And some I see that twofold balls and trouble scepters carry. So it's like there's a sense that they're not just kings of one kingdom, but in fact kings of many kingdoms, that the kingdom is not just in Scotland, but is expanding outward. And there's actually some historical significance to that, which we'll discuss after we get done with the play. Horrible sight, now I see 'tis true, for the bold, blood-boltered Banquo smiles upon me, and points at them for his. And so, yes, the prophecy regarding Banquo is still true. Macbeth, in all his efforts, going so far as to murder his best friend and attempt to murder his best friend's son, are all for naught, because what is prophesied is still to come. So, the first witch kind of jumps in. Well, of course, what were you expecting, Macbeth? Of course. And now they vanish. Macbeth, where are they gone? Let this pernicious hour stand I cursed in the calendar. Everything that he thought was so good, not so good. And here comes Lennox. Now, of course, we know from Lennox at the end of Act 3 that he kind of knows what's up with Macbeth. And in a sense, he is now kind of the spy, the anti-spy, the double agent within Macbeth's castle, staying close to him, kind of finding out what's going on with Macbeth, and so he can report it out. And so, what's your grace's will? Are you the weird sisters? No, my lord, of course not. Come they not by you? No, indeed, my lord. Macbeth curses them. Infected be the air whereon they ride, and damned be all that trust them. I did hear the galloping of horse. Who was it came by? 'Tis 2 or 3, my lord, that bring word of Macduff is fled to England. And so Macbeth resolves here, time thou anticipates my dread exploits. The flighty purposes ne'er o'ertook, unless the deed go with it. Now here's an important bit of dialogue that we get from Macbeth. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. We've talked about how Macbeth started out as somebody who talked themselves in and out of things, was a real head case, always in his head, debating with himself, talk. He gets progressively more action-driven as the play goes along, and now we come to the point where he is pure action. Here he's saying, from the moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. So the first inclinations, it's not even necessarily thoughts, but the first things that spring upon my heart are things that I'm going to do. And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done. And so what is he resolving to do? Because it's just sprung into his heart. What is he going to do? The castle of Macduff I will surprise. Seize upon Fife, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls. that trace him in his line. No boasting like a fool, this deed I'll do before this purpose cool. This is a line that's a little bit reminiscent of words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. He recognizes that he's let himself do that in the past. Well, not again. I'll do it before the purpose cools off. But no more sights. Where are these gentlemen? Come, bring me where they are, the ones who have the news of Macduff fleeing to England. And thus we come to the end of Act 4, Scene 1, and we'll tackle Act 4, Scenes 2 and 3 in another video. Alright, folks, take care.